Every morning, millions of Americans wake up at the exact same time. They hit snooze, rush through breakfast, fight traffic, spend 8, sometimes 10 hours working for someone else's schedule just so they can finally start living when they're 65. That's the plan, or at least, that's what they've been told. But what if retirement was never about old age? What if every dollar you saved wasn't buying a bigger bank account? It was quietly buying something far more valuable, time. And most people don't realize that until it's almost gone. Meet Daniel, 33 years old, an operations manager in Denver. He wasn't rich. He wasn't poor. He was exactly what America calls doing fine. A decent salary, a 3-bedroom house, a financed SUV, a wife, a 6-year-old daughter. Every Friday, his paycheck arrived, and every Monday, it already belonged to someone else. The mortgage, the car payment, insurance, groceries, student loans, credit cards, streaming subscriptions he barely used. By the end of each month, Daniel had almost nothing left, yet everyone around him thought he was successful because success looked expensive. One evening, Daniel was putting his daughter to bed. She looked up at him and asked, "Dad, are you coming to my school play tomorrow?" Daniel smiled. "I'll try." He meant it. But the next morning, his boss called an emergency meeting. The school play started at 2 p.m. The meeting ended at 4:30. When Daniel got home, his daughter had already fallen asleep. Her tiny costume was still hanging on the bedroom door. He quietly closed it and told himself something millions of people tell themselves every day. One day, things will slow down. That weekend, Daniel opened his retirement account. The number looked bigger than ever. For the first time, he felt safe. He smiled, closed the laptop, and went back to work on Monday. He thought he was saving for retirement. He had no idea he was actually buying something much more important, but he wouldn't understand that until one ordinary Tuesday changed the rest of his life. Tuesday morning started like every other Tuesday. Daniel grabbed his coffee, kissed his wife goodbye, and promised his daughter, "I'll see you tonight." At exactly 10:17 SIR0 a.m., his phone rang. It wasn't his wife. It wasn't his boss. It was an unknown number. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something told him to answer. "Mr. Carter, this is Denver General Hospital. We need you to come immediately." For a moment, the world went silent. His heartbeat grew louder than the traffic outside. What happened? There was a brief pause. "I'm sorry. Your father collapsed this morning." Daniel froze. His father, Richard Carter, was 64 years old, 1 year away from retirement. For over 40 years, Richard had done everything exactly right. He never missed a day of work. He rarely took vacations. He skipped birthdays, missed anniversaries, and postponed family trips, always saying the same thing. After retirement, we'll travel. After retirement, I'll spend more time with the family. After retirement, I'll finally relax. That future had become his motivation. Every sacrifice was supposed to lead there. Daniel rushed through the hospital doors. The waiting room felt strangely quiet. His mother sat alone, staring at the floor. She looked up. Her eyes were already filled with tears. "The doctor wants to speak with you." Minutes later, the doctor walked in. The surgery was successful. Daniel finally exhaled. But then the doctor continued, "Your father survived, but his heart has been severely damaged. He'll need months of recovery. And even then, it's unlikely he'll ever return to full-time work." The room became silent again. Richard had spent 40 years saving for the life he was finally supposed to begin. And now his body was telling him that time had already made its decision. Daniel looked through the hospital room window. His father was awake, weak, tired, older than Daniel had ever noticed before. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't looking at his father, he was looking at his own future. The next morning, Daniel walked quietly into his father's hospital room. Richard smiled. It was weak, but genuine. "You should be at work," Richard joked. Daniel forced a smile. "I think work can wait today." For a few minutes, they said nothing. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor filled the silence. Then Richard looked out the window and quietly said, "You know what hurts the most?" Daniel shook his head. "It's not the surgery. It's not the pain. It's realizing I spent my healthiest years preparing for a life my body may never be able to enjoy." Daniel didn't know what to say. Richard continued, "When you were little, I kept promising we'd go fishing. I promised we'd drive across America. I promised we'd visit Yellowstone together. I always believed there would be time later. Later became 20 years. Daniel looked down. He remembered every promise, every canceled vacation, every birthday his father missed, every baseball game where one seat stayed empty. Richard wasn't a bad father. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't selfish. He was responsible. He did exactly what society told him to do. Work hard, save money, retire, then enjoy life. The formula sounded perfect until life ignored the formula because retirement isn't guaranteed. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Health isn't guaranteed. The only thing any of us truly own is today. For the first time, Daniel understood something that had never crossed his mind before. His retirement account was never just a pile of money. Every dollar inside it represented hours of his life, hours he had traded for freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to say no, freedom to spend time with the people he loved. It had never been about becoming rich. It was about buying back his time. And suddenly, the title retirement savings didn't sound quite right anymore because what people were really saving for was the chance to own their own life again. A week after leaving the hospital, Daniel did something that surprised everyone around him. He didn't quit his job. He didn't sell his house. He didn't become a millionaire overnight. Instead, he started making much smaller decisions. He stopped saying, maybe next year. He used his vacation days instead of letting them expire. He turned off his work phone during dinner. He never missed another school play. On weekends, he stopped chasing overtime and started chasing memories. One Saturday morning, Daniel finally took his daughter fishing, not because he had become wealthy, but because he realized he didn't need more money to start living. He simply needed to stop postponing life. Months later, Richard slowly recovered. He couldn't work the way he once did. But one autumn afternoon, he sat beside a quiet lake, watching Daniel teach his granddaughter how to fish. For a long time, Richard said nothing. Then he smiled and quietly whispered, "This is what I was saving for." Daniel looked at him and finally understood. Retirement was never supposed to be the reward for a life already well lived. Too many people spend their healthiest years trading time for money, believing they'll buy their freedom later. But later is a promise that no one can make. Money can grow again, careers can be rebuilt, investments can recover, but a missed birthday never comes back. A childhood doesn't wait. Parents don't stay young forever, and neither do we. The goal was never to escape work. The goal was to build a life where work no longer owned every hour you had. Save for retirement, invest wisely, plan for the future, but don't sacrifice the only life you're guaranteed to live, because one day you won't remember how many hours you worked. You'll remember who was waiting for you while you were working. And maybe the greatest investment was every ordinary Tuesday you chose to spend with the people you loved, because in the end, you weren't saving for retirement. You were buying back your time. Time is the only wealth you can never earn back.